This episode of Harvey Brownstone Interviews is brought to you by the Harvey Brownstone Talk Show Blend Coffee, available at hollywoodblends.com. Everyone's saying it's the best coffee they've ever tasted. Why not give it a try and see for yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today's special guest is a legendary actor who's given us dozens of unforgettable performances in a career that spans over 6 decades. He's widely considered to be America's finest classical actor, having tackled the most challenging Shakespearean roles, including Hamlet, Richard III, MacBeth, King Lear, and Henry IV. He has starred in many other highly acclaimed theatrical productions, including Incident at Vichy, The Country Wife, MacBird, Indians, Long Day's Journey into Night, Deathtrap, The Kentucky Cycle, Other Desert Cities, Death of a Salesman, Art, and Love Letters. On the big screen, he's appeared in dozens of great movies, including The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, Doc, Fat City, The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, The New Centurions, Up in Smoke and the sequel, Nice Dreams, That Championship Season, Escape from LA, American History X, W, The Bourne Legacy, Nebraska, Gold, and many more. And on television, aside from his groundbreaking role as everybody's favorite private detective, Mike Hammer, we also remember him in Die Gang, Titus, Prison Break, Lights Out, Crowded, Man with a Plan, and Blue Bloods. He's also starred in many renowned miniseries, including Jesus of Nazareth, The Blue and the Gray, Princess Daisy, Mistral's Daughter, Hemingway, Blackbeard, Meteor, and Tokyo Trial. And who can forget his wonderful audio podcast series, The Twilight Zone Radio Dramas. In 2013, he wrote a highly compelling, fascinating, and insightful memoir entitled All in All, An Actor's Life on and Off the Stage. The list of awards and accolades this man has received is jaw-dropping. He's won 4 Drama Desk Awards, 3 Vernon Rice Awards, 2 Helen Hayes Awards, a Hollywood Film Award, a Kansas City Film Critics Circle Award, a Mary Pickford Award, the German Independence Honorary Award, and a Star of Excellence at the Oldenburg Film Festival. He has received Lifetime Achievement Awards from the San Diego Film Festival and the St. Louis International Film Festival. In the year 2000, he received the prestigious Millennium Recognition Award from Shakespeare Theatre Company for his outstanding contribution to classical theatre. In 2012, he became George Mason University's first Heritage Professor of Stage and Screen. In 2015, our guest was inducted into the American Theatre Hall of Fame, and in 2019, he received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I'm delighted and deeply honored to welcome the magnificent Stacy Keach to our show. Mr. Keach, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Harvey. I'm exhausted. Thank you. You're a wonderful publicist.
Well, you're a wonderful subject, believe me.
Oh, thank you.
I want to start by paying tribute to your father, Stacy Keach Sr.
Oh, thank you. Yes, please.
Who wrote, directed, and produced the highly popular radio show Tales of the Texas Rangers. And as an actor, he was in a lot of TV shows, including The Lone Ranger, The Californians, Get Smart, Bonanza, many more. Did he ever give you any career advice?
He didn't give me advice so much as but he did. The most wonderful thing was going with my dad. I was 10 years old, down to NBC studios to watch the live, well, it was actually taped, production of Tales of the Texas Rangers with these wonderful actors of that era, Willard Waterman, Joel McCrea, David Bruce. And I was mesmerized because for the first time, I saw how actors work, and particularly in radio, which is what this medium was, appealing to the imagination. And that's what radio does, I think, more than television. It makes you visualize in your mind what is being said or what is being acted upon. And that was my great experience with my dad. He gave me that. He did give me advice later. He didn't want me to be an actor. He didn't want either me or my brother. He said, it's just too difficult in life. And then you're better off becoming a doctor or a lawyer, which I didn't really have much interest in doing that. I wanted to act. And I was very lucky and blessed that I had a wonderful experience in both high school and college, acting in plays and learning my craft.
Well, your father's vision of your career, once he accepted that you were going to become an actor, his
Yes,
vision was firmly grounded in the movies and television. But as a young man, you were totally immersed in classical theater. Did
yes,
you did you ever feel conflicted between your father's vision and your own?
I did. I was actually, yes, because he was very much in favor. He wanted Norman. He wanted me to be successful monetarily. He wanted me to have a career that would be recognized by people, and he thought that classical acting, in particular Shakespeare, was not the way not the way to go. But I couldn't help myself. I loved Laurence Olivier. He was my mentor and my God and my when I was growing up. I mean, I thought this is a man who can not only do classical work, he can do movies as well, and he can do modern work. And I wanted to be like that. That was to me, that was the top. That was the pinnacle. But
Well, in 1977, you both appeared in the TV miniseries Jesus of Nazareth. Now, I know you didn't have any scenes together, but did you get to know him at all?
I didn't get to know him on Jesus of Nazareth, but I had the great opera. I went backstage to see him when he was doing Long Day's Journey into Night at the Old Vic, because at that time, I was in school at Lambda, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. And he was very gracious, but he called his assistant in and said, uh, John, come in. I want you to meet Stanley Creech.
Oh,
So from that point on, from that day on, I was Stanley Creech. I didn't want to correct him. And then later, some years later, I met him once again. Robert Wagner graciously invited me over to his house, knowing that I was a fan of Sir Lawrence, and we spent a few. I spent some time, very about 20 minutes, but I was in heaven. I mean, to me, it was one of the great experiences of my life to be able to talk to him. Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I was shocked to learn, Mr. Keach, that Robert Lewis, co founder of the Actors Studio, rejected you after a brief conversation without even giving you a proper audition. Do you think, in some way, that not going to the Actors Studio was a blessing?
I don't know if it was a blessing or not, but I remember the event of meeting with Robert Lewis, and I thought, oh, this is a slam dunk. I'm gonna. He was so nice to me, and I began to learn at that particular moment in time that sometimes that the personal attitude does not necessarily reflect a person's professional status. And he was nice to me, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna get in. No, it didn't happen. And it does, that happens a lot. And I think actors have to learn how to take rejection, which is impossible. I mean, nobody likes to be rejected, and no matter what you do, it's always disappointing. So when I was teaching, I thought to myself, one of the great gifts I might be able to bestow upon my young students and actors is how to deal with that situation. And I came up with the idea. I said, when you go into an audition, think to yourself that you are auditioning them. You're not you're not being auditioned. You're auditioning them. You're there to test whether or not you want to work with them. And it liberates a certain emotional block.
I think that's brilliant, brilliant advice. But obviously, you did not need to learn the method to be a successful actor. That's for sure. And
No,
In your book, you explained the major difference between acting in live theater versus acting in the movies. You said movies offer the luxury of doing a scene over and over until you get it right, but sometimes you have to repeat yourself only because someone with more power than you didn't like that take. But
Right.
on stage, once a play begins, the actor is essentially his own boss. So, Mr. Keach, do you have a preference as between acting on stage and acting in front of the camera?
No, I really don't. I like I love them both. And also doing radio. LA Theater Works is celebrating this year its 50th anniversary. We started in 1974. I couldn't believe it. Susan Lowenberg, God bless her. But I don't have a preference. I think that each of the mediums has their own criteria. For example, television, series television, which has evolved over the years, but it moves very quickly, and you have to be on top of your game. You have to really know your lines, and you have to know not only your lines, but how to say those lines many different ways, because you may have a director who comes in and says, "Oh, can you do this a little lighter, a little lighter?" John Huston, who I loved as a director, only had two directions. He said, a little less or a little more. Those were his only two signposts. And I, I try when I'm teaching, I try to encourage my actors to do whatever they can to make themselves feel comfortable. And the most essential thing is to know the material. Unless you're thrown into a situation where you are told to improvise, generally speaking, actors get the script in enough time to work on it, to memorize it, perhaps. But I just recently, as a matter of fact, did a series of auditions for Noah Baumbach for the movie Jay Kelly, starring George Clooney, and I'm going to be playing his dad, because in this audition, I had to audition for the role. And in that audition, it was 4 scenes, and I was told to do the scenes differently each time. And I loved that. I loved being able to explore the dimensions of the emotional expression. One of the other techniques that I encourage my actors to do is take the line, "I love you." "I love you" can be said many different ways. And I asked my actors to do it, say "I love you" 5 different ways. I love you. I love you. I love you. I mean, just to find all the different permutations and the variety and the versatility that you can lend that particular moment.
Well, as you know, you are renowned for your performance of Hamlet. You chose not to portray him as an indecisive neurotic, but as a man of action who is undone by his impulsivity in making too many decisions. And you've said you considered it essential to find the humor in his character. Why was that so important?
Well, because it's a tragedy. And I think we need levity. Yeah, I think in order to, and also I think humor allows an audience to identify and to care for. Many Hamlets that I've seen over the years were, well, they varied, of course, but I think when you get so caught up in the sadness or the of the situation, you lose the audience. Audiences don't want to be, they want to care about the character and about the situation. And if you, the actor, cares about it and wrestle with all the permutations of and the variety that you can lend to the character, I think you give a better chance of creating a role that the audience can identify with. And Hamlet's a tough one. But there is a lot of humor that is written into the part, particularly when he feigns madness. That's with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. Yeah.
You said in your book, Mr. Keach, that the role of Richard III resonates with you on a personal level much more than any other role you've played because of Richard's need for vengeance. Why did the need for vengeance resonate with you so much?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that it was so much the need for. I know I said that, but I also think that his physical deformity, which I identified with in terms of my cleft when I was, and when I started acting, that became an issue with agents, and they said, "You got to fix yourself. You got to fix your head." I said, "No, this is who I am." And of course, since then, we had other actors that have become big stars. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix, Cheech and Chong. But vengeance is a very accessible thing to play in Shakespeare because there are many, not just Richard III, but there are other roles where getting even becomes the most important aspect of the story. I never had the chance to play Iago in a theatrical setting, but to me, and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do it because it's one of my favorite characters. It's the longest part in Shakespeare, but he's also he is the machinations and the imagination that he gives to his vengeance is extraordinary, and it requires an actor. I think we've seen. I loved production with Chris Plummer and James Earl Jones. It was wonderful. I thought that really captured the essence of that relationship. And I saw Olivier do it with Frank Finley at the Old Vic back in the day, and he was also wonderful, wonderful.
Well,
Anyway,
you've had such a career. In 1969, you were abruptly fired from the cast of Catch 22 after 3 days, and
right,
you were replaced by Martin Balsam. You
right.
also didn't get the role of the priest in The Exorcist, and you didn't get the Jack Nicholson role in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. You
No,
wrote in your book that these disappointments triggered an identity crisis over whether you were a stage actor or a film actor. So, how long did it take you to realize that you could be equally successful in both mediums?
well, the next movie or play that I was happened to be grateful to do. I mean, those were disappointments, but as I've said many times, that you've got to be able to it's not water off a duck's back, but it's close to it. You've got to be able to move on, move away from whatever disappointments you have. And if you want to continue to work, because it is the nature of the beast, it is the nature of the work, it's the essence of being an entertainer who is at the mercy of agents, directors, and other actors, and writers and producers. And you have to please a lot of different people. But the most important person to please is yourself. And if you're happy with your work, what makes me happy with my work is when I'm able to give people the enjoyment that I derive from seeing a wonderful performance. And I think
You've
that's
done that 100-fold. I want to read you something, Mr. Keach, that you wrote in your book about acting. You said, and I'm quoting you here, acting is a tricky business filled with uncertainty and rejection. It is inherently competitive because when someone else gets the part, you lose out, and that makes it lonely. You're
yeah.
constantly competing and worrying about unfulfilled expectations. It's
Mm.
poisonous thinking to live as if each success validates you and each failure or rejection is a condemnation.
Mm.
So, your way of dealing with rejection and disappointments in this business was basically, it sounds like, that you developed a very thick skin.
You have to have thick skin. You do. And I think one of the things that again, coming from a theatrical family with my father, so I mean, I remember early days when he was working as an actor and having rejection issues. So I grew up with it, as did my brother. And my brother, God bless him, he's doing so well now as a director. But he took him a long time to get to the point where he felt comfortable in the medium. And once he started doing documentaries, that began to happen it happened right away.
But you know, when you look at the trajectory of your career after the Catch-22 fiasco, you went on to play Buffalo Bill on Broadway, which earned you a Tony nomination and a Drama Desk Award. So, did you learn from that experience to trust your destiny and not despair when things go wrong? Because there's a plan there for you.
Well, I guess it was the message that I was giving myself was you have to be better. You just have to be better. You're not good enough. And you have to accept that and get better. Do whatever you have to do to get better. And that was
Well, I'm very interested that you, as a teacher, you believe that nowadays training for actors includes guidance on how to deal with the rejection and the disappointments that every actor has to get used to. Because I doubt that you got any of that guidance when you were training.
I didn't. No, I didn't really. But so often actors who are successful early on in their careers, who have a big splashy movie, and going on, they find themselves having difficulties because they're not used to, one, the fame or the success, and they're not able to assimilate that into their lives, and that becomes a problem. So I always say, focus on the work. And if you don't have the work, you have to create the work. And the way to do that is to take a scene out of Hamlet or any classical play and call up one of your buddies and do this, act, do the scene and maybe invite some people in to be members of the audience, because you've got to keep working. Once you stop working or stop creating, then that's not a good time.
I tell you, this interview is a master class for acting students, I'll tell you. Now, I read that you turned down the role of Hawkeye in MASH, the movie, the Donald Sutherland part. Is that right?
Yes, it's true. So I made some big mistakes. That was one. That was a big mistake. But the reason being, Robert Altman, God bless him, had called me after MacBird, the play that I did off Broadway, depicting Lyndon Johnson in his most crazy moments. And it was a big success off Broadway. And Robert Altman decided he wanted to make a movie of MacBird. And he was out on the West Coast, and he went to see Phil Bruns play the same part that was being done in Los Angeles. And he decided he was going to cast Phil Bruns as MacBird. Well, I was really upset because I felt like this was my role, this was something that I had created. So when he asked me to play in MASH, I just said, no, this is a big mistake. To let your emotions cloud your judgment. This is a very big problem. And that's what happened with me in MASH.
Well, it didn't ultimately matter because of all the wonderful roles you did get. You mentioned working with the legendary director, John Huston. He directed you in Fat City and The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. And then he appeared with you as an actor, along with Henry Fonda, in The Marathon. What was he like to work with as a director versus as an actor?
Well, as an actor, it's very interesting because I was playing a sort of a good Nazi, a German soldier, and he was sympathetic, sort of. But I was concerned because the director was Italian and didn't speak much English, and I was concerned about my accent. So I went to John and I said, this is after we've done 2 movies together with him directing me. I said, John, I want to know, have you been listening? How is my accent? Don't talk to me about accent, Stacy. I'm directing. And I'm not directing you now. You're acting and I'm acting, and you just have to go out and do the best you can. And, so he didn't give me any direction about my accent, and I never knew if it was any good or not until I saw the movie, and then I realized it was not so good. But it was great working with him, and Henry Fonda working. I mean, Henry Fonda was he gave a great lesson in decorum, in acting decorum. He was playing an American general, and the scene was a dinner with an Irish industrialist played by John Huston, an Austrian actress played by Samantha Eggar, a German soldier played by yours truly, and this was just these small group of people, and Henry Fonda did his scenes first thing in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. He was on camera, makeup, and the whole thing is done, and he stayed the entire day to do off camera for the other actors. Now, most actors would not do that. After they did their work, they would leave, but not Henry Fonda. God, he was a wonderful man, a wonderful professional, and so gracious, so generous.
What a gentleman. What a gentleman. Now, your movie, Fat City, the studio cut out 20 minutes from that movie. And I'm just wondering, would you like to see the full uncut version of the movie released on DVD one day?
Love to see it. Yes. And I think a lot of people would. Yeah, it was interesting because the reason being the studio at the time in Columbia Pictures thought that it was too much of a downer. But the whole essence, and what John Huston was defending his position, which was the same as mine, that it has to be a downer. The story, Billy Tully, the actor, the character that I was playing, has to hit bottom. He has to have nothing. You know, he's homeless. He's living in an incinerator when he's on the streets. And they thought this is all too depressing, and they cut it. And I think it was it hurt the movie. The movie character had to hit total bottom before it could be resuscitated in any way, shape, or form.
Well, I really hope they find that footage and re-release the movie because I want to see the whole thing. And another great legend you worked with was Orson Welles in the 1982 film Butterfly. What was he like to work with?
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. What a character. What a wonderful. He was one of my heroes as well. Citizen Kane is still my favorite movie, I think. But he was playing a judge, and he was pretty heavy in those days. And he was sitting behind, he would always arrive early on the set. He wanted to be there, ready to go before anybody arrived. And he was smoking a cigar. And he was also drinking a little vodka. There was in a glass behind it. And I don't know how it happened, but he actually caught on fire. His robes caught on fire. And he said, "Will somebody please put me out?"
That's hilarious. And another legend I want to ask you about is Gregory Peck, who played Abraham Lincoln in the TV miniseries The Blue and the Gray. You played Jonas Steele. You described Mr. Peck as courtly and kind, an old school gentleman of the highest caliber. Can you share any memories of the time you spent with him?
Oh, it was wonderful, wonderful. And, you know, playing Abraham Lincoln is a daunting task because of who he was. But Mr. Peck had his interpretation of the Gettysburg Address is I still remember it vividly because the end of the speech is government of the people, by the people, for the people. And Gregory Peck decided to emphasize people, government of the people, for the people. And that had never been done before because usually it's of the people, by the people, for the people, instead of for the people. And that was the essence of of his performance and also of those times. It was a great, great interpretation. And I had the great pleasure and privilege later. He had this wonderful program with the library, the Los Angeles Library, where he would do readings of plays and I did it. Kathy Bates and I were invited down to do a reading in his presence. It was great. He was a
But
wonderful.
you've portrayed a number of real people throughout your career. You've played Wilbur Wright, Napoleon, Ernest Hemingway, Martin Luther. You've played Presidents Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon, and many others. What research do you do when you're preparing to play a real human being?
I love playing real people because it gives me an opportunity to learn not only about them and their families and whatever, but also about the era, the period from which they emerged. And it's like, it's a history lesson for me. And I love it. I love doing research on characters and trying to find what is the dominant behavioral essence of that character. It's you become a psychiatrist in a way as an actor, but you have to. Actors have to be. They have to diagnose a person's behavior in certain, whether right or wrong. See, I don't think that there is necessarily a right way and a wrong way, unless you think that the right way of depicting a character is, I don't want to say negative, because I think it's important that, yes, you want to play characters that people care about or they understand or they sympathize with. But in the event that you're playing a bad guy, and I played a lot of those, you've got to find a way to make that bad guy attractive. And generally speaking, humor comes into play. If you can get a laugh, even if it's somebody who's not so, even if it may be disgusting in some way, it'll help you to engage the audience's attention.
Well, one of the real people you played was Hemingway in the 1988 miniseries, for which you won a Golden Globe Award and you got an Emmy Award nomination. You said in your book that you disagreed with the director, Bernard Sinkel's perception of Ernest Hemingway's personality. In what way did the two of you disagree?
Well, Mr. Sinkel believed that, first of all, Bernard Sinkel, he grew up in Germany during the war. And he was very, I don't want to say anti-American, but he felt that Ernest Hemingway was the archetype, the prototype of the ugly American. And I disagreed with that. I wanted to show many different, phases of his personality. That's too limiting, But it was a struggle. We managed to get through it, but and I was surprised because he did a wonderful job writing the scripts, and so he took many aspects of interviews that Hemingway had done and things that had been written about him, and he managed to these things managed to find their way into the scripts. So I thought, well, it's going to treat us in a positive way, but he wanted to. He always, whenever he was nasty to a woman, he was the close up was on the woman and not on Hemingway. He really didn't like Hemingway, and that's tough when you're working with a director who doesn't like the hero. It's tough.
Did he ever say anything to you after you got such great accolades for your performance? Did he ever acknowledge that you were right?
We didn't have a relationship after that. After I left, after we finished Hemingway, the shooting of it, that was the end of it. But Danny Wilson, God bless him, he's no longer with us, but he was a wonderful producer. And he was the one who really and got me involved, along with my wonderful lawyer at the time, Sidney Feinberg. They were the people who really encouraged my playing Hemingway.
Well, of course, Mr. Keach, I have to ask you a few questions about your portrayal of Mike Hammer. When when Mickey Spillane handed over the film rights to Mike Hammer, he had only three requirements: that Hammer wear a snap brim hat,
Yeah,
that he have short hair,
yeah,
and that he carry a 45, not a 38.
right.
Did Mickey Spillane give you any advice on how to play Hammer?
No, not really, but he did. We did have one issue that we dealt with. I looked terrible in a snap brim hat. It just didn't look good. So we decided, let's go for a fedora. So the fedora was the hat that Hammer wore during the. But the fact that Mickey was preoccupied with Hammer's hat in itself is a wonderful story. The fact and also his vision of who Mike Hammer was and the short hair.
But you know what really surprises me? It's actually astounding. You were hired by producer Jay Bernstein to play Mike Hammer on the spot with not even a screen test. Isn't that amazing?
I don't know. I didn't think so at the time. Well, when I think of all the other screen tests that I've had to do, yes, you're right. But at the time, and I think maybe there was an urgency involved when if you're behind schedule and you got to catch up. And I think the studio was behind schedule, so they had to get an actor in there pretty quick.
Well, we were all grateful that it was you. You wrote that when you read Mickey Spillane's books, you saw Hammer as a cross between James Bond, Dirty Harry, and the Steve McQueen character in Bullitt.
Right.
And you chose to portray him not only as a vengeful vigilante, but as a man who really cared about helping the underdog in society, which made his character very, very appealing. But as you know, some critics felt the show was too violent and too sexist. What was your response to that criticism?
Well, I understood it, but I didn't agree with it, obviously. But that happens a lot, when critics they don't understand or they don't accept a point of view about a character that goes too far one way or the other. And I don't think I know that there was one point during the Hammer years where I was told by the producer, not Jay Bernstein, but somebody else from the network, that you can't call somebody a greaseball. It's that's off limits. That's and I said, well, what about a turkey? Calling somebody a turkey. They said, no, can't use either. So I couldn't say you turkey or you grease. I couldn't. And those were part of Hammer's vocabulary in my mind. And so, that restriction was disturbing. But Barbara Corday, who was then became the head of Columbia, was very much against all of the buxom ladies, and she thought that the shows were very anti-feminist. And I didn't understand that because because I was still inside the character. I loved all the ladies on the show.
Well, when you think about it, Mike Hammer was not a misogynist. He was not abusive. He just loved beautiful women and they loved him.
That's right. You said it better than I could have. That's exactly right. And I think that's why the show ran for 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Well, there's no doubt that Mike Hammer made you a huge TV star. It made you a male sex symbol. Was there an element within the theater community that felt you sold out by starring in a TV series?
Well, if there was, they didn't tell me, so I don't know if that's true. I'm sure that was probably true, but I never got wind of it. No, thank God.
Well, you've said in several interviews that I've watched that you prefer to take only the roles that challenge you in some way or force you to stretch yourself as an actor. You care more about your range than your image. Has it been difficult to stick to that plan as a career goal?
No, it still remains. And I'm just getting ready to play I'm going to play George Clooney's father in Noah Baumbach's next movie, Jay Kelly, about a movie star, and I play his dad. And we'll be shooting in May in Tuscany, and I'm looking forward to that.
I can't wait to see that. I hope you'll come back when the movie comes out.
I'd love to.
Oh, I'd love to have you back. You know, one of your most important movies, Mr. Keach, in my opinion, is American History X, in which you play a neo-Nazi, Cameron Alexander. The movie was important because it addressed the issue of racism in America.
Yes.
Mr. Keach, are there times when you hesitate before taking on a role that you know will be controversial?
Yes, there are. Yes, I read scripts that are just, for one reason or another, either I don't agree with the sentiments, but yes, but it's not, rarely. It doesn't. It's not something that happens all the time. Because generally speaking, when people come to me to play a part, they know kind of what they're going to get. I mean, and yeah, I mean, I don't have issues. Like, I'm ready to play a movie, another film, where the opening scene is about an old guy who's he's been thrown out of the nursing home, and he's riding on a motorcycle, screaming and yelling down the street, nude, naked, totally naked. Yeah, I can't wait to play it. People say, well, don't you have objections to being nude on camera? No, no. I mean, we're actors, Anyway,
if that's what the role calls for, then you do it.
Exactly. And it'd be fun. And it's the opening scene.
I wonder what you'll do for an encore.
Northbound is the name of the movie, Northbound.
Now, in your book, Mr. Keach, you were very frank and forthright about your cocaine addiction and the reasons for that addiction. You said that cocaine helped you hide your insecurities and that you believed at the time that cocaine gave you clarity of purpose and clarity of expression as an actor. So I want to ask you, if there's someone watching this interview who has a drug addiction and who feels they need drugs for the same reasons that you felt you needed cocaine, what would you say to them?
Get some help, because ultimately it will catch up with you. It will catch up with you and destroy you. It is the most diabolical drug because it gives you a feeling of positive feeling. It creates a positive feeling that later then becomes very negative. I wrote a little story called The Trip about, and the metaphor was that the journey that this person to get on this train, and the train was the experience of being high on cocaine. And every time he would get on the train to go to his final destination, the destination became further and further away, and he couldn't get there. He couldn't get there. It's like that's what happens with drugs. I think what happens with drugs, at least it did with me. There is no more satisfaction. There's only misery. And thank God I had a wonderful, and I still have a wonderful wife. My wife, Malgosia, 39 years we've been married, and 37. I'm sorry, 37 years. And she helped me get rid of that problem.
Thank God. Thank God for her, and thank God that you did. I don't know if you're aware of this, but I'm a retired criminal court judge. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Well, I can't resist asking you whether you think the criminal justice system and the use of incarceration is an appropriate way to rehabilitate drug addicts.
No, I do not. I do not feel that way. I feel that it's a medical problem. It's not a legal problem. It's a medical problem. Yes, when you get involved with doing something, taking an illegal substance, then it is legal. Yes, it is legal. But the result, I think I would have been better off in a medical situation. However, the experience of spending 6 months in Reading jail was very eye-opening and very revealing to me for many different reasons. And I got a perspective that allowed me to feel not so special, that being a celebrity and being famous is not the key to happiness. That's for sure.
Well, I remember seeing an interview with Jane Bernstein, who said that your arrest and conviction and imprisonment actually had the effect of making you a bigger star than you were before. Do you agree with that?
I don't know. It's hard for me to say, whether more or less did it help me or did it hurt me. I don't know. I really don't.
Well, after your release from jail, you narrated a TV documentary called High on the Job
Yes.
about the problems of cocaine use in the workplace. You also
Right.
testified before Congress and you spoke at rehab centers and on college campuses. But very interestingly, you refused to appear on David Letterman's show. Is that because you didn't want to take the risk that he would make jokes about what you had been through?
Yes. There was very much,
You just did not want to joke about it.
Well, I didn't. It was too early in my. It was just right after I got out of Reading, and I didn't want to. I didn't feel it was something to make fun of. No.
Well, it isn't. It isn't.
No.
And I must say that I agree with you about incarceration. I can't say never, but I rarely incarcerated anybody whose main source of problem was an addiction because they needed rehab, not incarceration. But
Right.
I will say that it has a deterrent effect because people would say to me, I never ever want to go back there again. And so fear would motivate them to stop using. So there's a difference of opinion within the system, but I tend to agree with you.
Good. I like to hear that.
How did it feel to play a prison warden on Prison Break after what you personally went through in the UK?
Well, it was wonderful. It gave me a chance to really get that whole period of my life out of my system. It was wonderful. And I had a great role model. When I was in Reading, the governor, the warden, was very sympathetic to my cause because he had lost his son to drug addiction. So he was very sympathetic to me because so he gave me a great job. I was the librarian and I had to read letters and write letters on behalf of the younger students down at the other end of the prison. We call them the YOs, the young offenders. And so I was totally preoccupied with helping others while I was in jail. And believe me, that made a big difference to my.
What an experience. What an experience. And I admire you and I respect you for the forthright way in which you wrote about it in your book. And I highly commend that book to everyone watching. Now, you've done a lot of voiceover work over the years. You were the voice of the PBS series Nova for over a decade, as well as American Greed, and you've narrated many documentaries, and you've done the Twilight Zone radio show, and of course, you were the voice of Skipper in the animated movie Planes.
Right.
Do you think that doing voiceover work has made you a better actor, Mr. Keach?
I do. I love doing voiceover work, and I think it's conveying through to the imagination, and I think the tone of I love doing American Greed, and I was very sorry when they said that's the end of that show because we did 16 years. That was a long period, and I loved being able to depict each of these shows have somebody in that show that was fascinating. I always found somebody that was particularly the early shows of American Greed. These two sisters, I remember one vividly of this show that forced these vagrants to write their wills to them. And then there was a video of them actually talking about this. Fascinating. But I love doing voiceover work. And I think you can add another dimension to a persona through a voice. So the tone of voice is very essential. I was just writing a piece for to celebrate 50 years of LA Theater Works. And there was a director, a legendary director from the BBC. His name was Martin Jenkins, and he taught us about how to depict the narration of a dramatic show. He said, you've got to be quiet. There's to be a quiet intensity, and you have to move it along. You can't let the audience get ahead of you. You got to go faster, quieter. He was a wonderful director, and he was so true, so right. Because when you listen to radio, you realize it has to move. You can't get stuck on something, otherwise you evaporate.
How did you like being the voice of Howard Duff on The Simpsons?
I love it. I love Howard Duff. Yeah, they could never figure if it was Howard Duff the sixth or the seventh. I still don't know. It doesn't matter.
Well, Mr. Keach, I only have one more question for you. Are you ready?
Oh, yes.
Okay, here goes. When you were a young man, your mother told you that you would know you really made it when you were a clue in the New York Times crossword puzzle.
Yes.
Did she ever get to see that happen?
Yes, she did. God bless her. Yes, she did. I'm very happy to say. She loved doing crossword puzzles. Yes.
Well, think of the joy you gave your mother when she saw your name as a clue.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Keach, I want to remind you of something that Robert Ryan once told you. He said that any actor should consider himself lucky if even a half dozen movies in their career turn out the way they hoped. Well, sir, when I look at your body of work, both on the stage, in the movies, and on television, I hope you know you have every reason to be immensely proud of the dozens of monumentally successful projects you've been a part of.
Thank you, Harvey. You're very kind.
Well, it's been an enormous honor and privilege having this opportunity to chat with you about your life and your career. I know how incredibly busy you are. You're about to go to Europe to make a movie with George Clooney. I thank you from my heart for taking the time to appear on our show.
My great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Our guest has been the legendary actor and author Stacy Keach, whose book, All in All, An Actor's Life on and Off the Stage, is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. You can also learn more about our guest by going to his official website, gostacykeach.com. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to my producer, Steve Silver, my director of programming, Robert Monaghan, my PR directors, Eileen Shapiro and Jimmy Starr, and my entire team at the XPTV1 network in the UK. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out all the great interviews on the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified when new videos are posted.